Hi, welcome back. Again, we're doing another background. This seemed like a fun thing to do, show you a little piece of my Christmas tree. Today I'm here because I want to talk to you about romance novels. And this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, but the reason that I decided to make this video now is that my good friend Liene over at Liene's Library recently made a video defending romance readers. Even though she herself is not much of a romance reader, she, I think, rightly defends romance as a genre. And this is something that I'd like to talk a little bit about. It's something that I've thought a lot about in the last year or so. In fact, I even wrote kind of an opinion piece that's going to be published in Bookshelf magazine, which I can link below if you guys want to check it out, talking about romance as a genre, talking about my experience starting to read romance. And so I thought it might be interesting to do a little bit of a discussion video with you guys, talking about the things that I've discovered about what I do and don't like in the genre. And then I will give you some recommendations of a few of my favorite romance books that I have read this year. So let's start out by talking about the fact that reading romance as a genre is often really looked down upon and sometimes is even seen as taboo. I definitely grew up seeing it as something that was trashy, something that I was supposed to stay away from, like those covers, you know, with like the heaving breasts and the bare-chested men, and like this is something that you just don't touch. Now, on the flip side of that, I did actually read a lot of more tame romances. I always loved sappy romantic movies as a teenager. I would read melodramatic sort of Christian romances or teen romances that didn't have all the sex in them. So I always kind of liked that aspect of it, but I saw a lot of the genre as trashy, and even the sort of melodramatic stuff that I did read that didn't have the sex as something lesser and something maybe shameful. And what I've come to realize as a grown woman who's been married for many years and has 2 kids, I have discovered the romance genre in a new way, and I found a lot of value in it. Not all of it is for me. Some of it just doesn't work well for me. There are certain things that I don't like about it. But I think there can be something deeply feminist about reading books that celebrate female sexuality, that celebrate love and joy and happiness and have happy endings. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think the reason it's often looked down upon is just because of that. Because it is a genre that is largely written by women, for women, and as a society we tend to sort of poo-poo and look down on things that are written for women, whether they be young women. Things that are put out for teen girls are often looked down upon just as much as things that are put out for adult women, unless they're seen as something that's more literary or something that's highbrow. And what's interesting is I don't think you have the same thing on the male end of the spectrum, because there is genre fiction, such as certain aspects of sci-fi or epic fantasy, that is branded as very masculine and male, but it's not looked down upon in the same way. And so I think there is a lot of value to openly celebrating this genre that is about women, that's written for women, that's mostly written by women, and that is a celebration of female sexuality. So that's kind of my spiel. And this is something that I've come to learn through being part of this community and making friends with some wonderful, very intelligent women who, as part of their reading diet, do read adult romance. And finding that out took me aback. These people who I really respect their opinions on books, who are intelligent and just wonderful people. I'm like, wait, you read what? You read like adult smutty romance? Maybe I'm missing something here. And so I started to give it a try, and I discovered that there were things that I was missing and that there is value to it. And also that even though not all of it is for me or for everyone, that, you know, there's a lot of good stuff happening there. So for those of you who've been following my reading this year, you might have noticed that I have started adding some romance to my TBR. And, you know, it has been a mixed experience. Overall, I am really happy I'm diving into this world. I'm learning a lot about what I specifically appreciate in romance and what I'm not such a fan of in romance. And this is going to be a little bit different for everyone, but I do think it's important to know, if you're interested in the genre, what tropes work for you and don't work for you. And the reality is I think in romance there is something for everyone. And this even extends to if you're uncomfortable with having explicit sex scenes in your romance, there are books for you as well. There are plenty of authors who do kind of a fade to black with those sorts of scenes and don't have a lot of explicit content in them. There is that out there if you're looking for it. But let's talk about what I have found that I like in a romance novel. So there's a few different types of romance. In general, there is contemporary romance, things set in the modern period. There is historical romance, and there is fantasy or paranormal romance. So those are kind of broadly, there's obviously more subgenres than that, but broadly we're going to say that those are three sort of categories of romance that we could talk about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about things that I do and don't like in each of those categories, and then I'll give you a recommendation or two of books that I enjoyed. In terms of historical romances, I enjoy a good historical romance. It feels very escapist to me, reading things that are set in Victorian England, which is often where these romances are set. And you know, it reminds me of Jane Austen. I grew up loving Jane Austen, so I like things that kind of take me back there, that are about courtly romance and social interactions, and I particularly appreciate things that are funny. I like snarky characters. I like a little bit of a hate to love romance, and so I think a really great example of this that I've very much enjoyed recently is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I've read a couple books by her now. So far, this is my favorite. It's about a duke who was injured in war and has a lot of scarring on his face and body, but he needs to get married to have an heir and carry on the line, and he doesn't think that he's lovable, and he's really kind of got a lot of walls up. He's kind of snarky. He ends up offering to marry this young woman who is a seamstress. She's a vicar's daughter working as a seamstress, and he basically says, hey, marry me and we'll sleep together every night, and then once you're pregnant I'll send you off, give you your own little house in the country, and you can raise the kid. We don't have to have anything to do with each other. So she ends up agreeing, but with some stipulations that they also have to have dinner together every night and have a conversation. And so, of course, a romance develops. This is how these things go. But they're just such great characters. She is a strong female character. He is like kind of gruff, but she snaps right back at him. And it's just really humorous too. There's a lot of humor in this, which I enjoy. So I like those kinds of characters. I think it's a nice progression. I think this one is really well done. I will say, in general, I really enjoy slow burn romances. So that, I think, is a great example. I haven't read widely into historical romance at this point, but I'm hoping to get a little bit more into it. I'm planning on soon picking up something by Beverly Jenkins, who is a woman of color romance author who I know does a lot of historical romance and does really good research from what I've heard, so I'm looking forward to trying her out. Another historical that I thought was fantastic is by an author who I think it maybe is becoming an auto-buy author for me, and that is Alyssa Cole. So I'm going to talk about some of her contemporary romances when we get to that, but first I want to talk about her historical. She is also another Black woman romance author and is so good. In general, I found that most of the time I prefer my romances to have a little bit of substance to them. I like them to not be purely fluff. I like them to be issue books where they grapple with some bigger issue, much like the rest of my reading. I like fantasy books that are issue books as well. I like fluff too sometimes, but I like things that have deeper themes that you can pull out, and I find it's the same thing in my romance, and Alyssa Cole is fantastic for this. So the historical romance that I read by her was early this year, An Extraordinary Union, and it is a historical romance set during the Civil War, and it is brilliant. It's so well done. It is fascinating. It is well researched. It is nuanced in the way that it handles issues of race and racism and power dynamics. It's amazing. It follows a young woman who is posing as a slave in the South to be a spy during the Civil War, and it is based on a true story. She has an eidetic memory, which means that she remembers everything that she reads and everything that she hears, which makes her a great spy, but she ends up falling for another spy who is a white man posing as a Southerner, and so it is so good. It's one of those stories that could have gone very, very wrong, but she just did it beautifully. It's a really beautiful romance story, but also it grapples with these real issues in such a good way. I'm really a fan of it. So now let's talk about contemporaries. One of my biggest issues with contemporary romance is I tend to hate the thing where people just sort of like jump into bed together right away. I prefer things that take a little bit longer, that are a little bit more of a build up with a relationship. I also really don't like the trope of casual hookup to lover. I'm not a fan. It really doesn't work for me. And so it's been a little bit of trial and error to find authors that write things that I'm into for contemporary romance. I'm much more picky about the things that I enjoy. However, I do have a few recommendations for you. Surprise, surprise, Alyssa Cole, the main contemporary author that I found that I like. These I actually have to show you. I have both of her Reluctant Royals series, and they're both fantastic. The second one particularly, but I'll talk about them. There is A Princess in Theory and A Duke by Default. I really enjoyed both of them. This one falls a little bit into the trap of them sort of like falling into bed together really quickly, which detracted a little bit from my rating, but this is fantastic because it deals with women in STEM. Plus the concept is just really cool. It's about this female grad student in the sciences who starts getting these emails that she thinks are spam telling her that she is the betrothed of an African prince, except it turns out that they're not spam. And so the concept is brilliant. It's really great. It's got some fantastic side characters, and it does a really great job of talking about women in STEM, talking about the issues that they face, and intersectionally talking about the issues that women of color face in those fields. So I love it. I love that it is an issue book with a fun romance and a really cool concept. And even more so, I adored A Duke by Default. This is the next book in the series. There are going to be more that I've already pre-ordered, but this one takes place in Scotland, and it is a very slow burn romance. Like, they don't even kiss until maybe a third of the way into the book, and I'm all about it. They have like snarky communication back and forth. It's a little bit of a hate to love romance. I really enjoyed this, and in terms of issues, it deals a little bit with adult ADHD, which I think is really cool. Also, can we just talk about how stunning these covers are? They're absolutely gorgeous. There is a novella in the series, which I'm super excited about. It's only going to be an ebook, but I've already got that pre-ordered, and then the third book in the series is also coming out next year, so I have that pre-ordered. I will be continuing with the series. Alyssa Cole is becoming definitely a favorite auto-buy author for me. The other contemporary romance that I read this year and really loved is actually another one by a woman of color author. This is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. I wasn't such a fan of the sequel because it has one of those tropes that I don't like, but I loved The Wedding Date. It is a interracial romance with a plus-size female main character. It is all about body positivity. It has a little bit of nuance to the way that it handles race. It's not perfect. I think it could have taken things farther than it did, but I think it does a good job. It's really good. So I've recommended that to a lot of people as well. I think it's a really fantastic one. The last category that I want to talk about, and this is something that I'm still trying to get into a little bit more, is fantasy or paranormal romance. And there's a lot of really good stuff out there that I want to dive into more. The first book that I want to talk to you guys about is actually one that I discovered quite a long time ago, back when I was still like uncomfortable with the idea of being a romance reader, but I just loved the main character in this series so much. I recommend it to lots of people, and I'm really happy it's finally getting some of the attention that it deserves. This is the first book in the series. This is Soulless by Gail Carriger. It's the first book in the Parasol Protectorate series, and it is brilliant. Alexia Terabati, the main character, is like the snarky female heroine that I need in my life who falls for a gruff werewolf. I like the spunky, snarky heroines with the gruff guys. Like, I just seem to be a fan of that trope. I love the world that she set up. Her world building is fantastic. She also has a prequel series that is YA and a spin-off series featuring the daughter of the main character in this that is another adult series. I've read a lot of her books and I really love them, so I highly recommend this. In terms of more paranormal romance, there are series that I suspect I'm gonna love, that I want to get into, and maybe I'll make this a goal of mine for 2019 to actually dive more into these series. The first one is by Patricia Briggs, the Mercy Thompson series, and I actually did read book 1 in the series several months ago and gave it 5 stars and loved it. I have the next few books in the series and I want to continue. I need to continue. I do have actually like some of the next books in the series. Despite the covers, guys, also, there's not like explicit sex in these. The first one, there was like a kiss and that was it. And from what I hear, she doesn't have a lot of explicit sex in them, but they're really, really good in terms of world building and character development. So for those of you who don't want explicit sex, that might be a great option for you. I've also really been wanting to start the Kate Daniels series by Alona Andrews. It's another paranormal urban fantasy romance that I think I'm probably gonna love. And finally, the Changeling series by Nalini Singh. Those are all things that I have heard enough about. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna love them. They have good world building, they have good characters. Some of the Changeling series has political intrigue, which I'm super into. And so a goal of mine for 2019 is to really get into those series. Okay, so briefly, let's talk about a few of the things that I don't like in romance, because there are plenty of them. And often there has been stuff that I've read that I either didn't really like or thought was mediocre, and often it's because it hits on some tropes or things that I'm not such a fan of. I already mentioned that I don't like the sort of casual hookup to lovers trope. Not a fan of that. The other thing I don't like is poorly handled power dynamics. So, for example, a boss starting a relationship with his employee or somebody who is beholden to him in terms of power, unless those power dynamics are very, very carefully handled. It just feels really icky to me. I don't like that. I also don't like this thing of guys being jerks and it being like portrayed as if it's sexy, like the sexy alpha male who's being overprotective but is actually super controlling. Like, I'm not into that. Again, unless it's handled really, really carefully, generally that is a bit of a turn off for me. I know some people are into that. It doesn't work super well for me. And this is something that I started to say earlier, is that even in terms of these books that do have explicit sex scenes, having something that is well written, that really focuses on the woman in that scene, I think really does something feminist in taking back female sexuality and placing an importance on female pleasure and female enjoyment, which reminds me, guys, this is gonna be like such a rambly video, I'm sorry. But that is the other thing that really irks me, guys, is consent. Like, if there is fuzzy consent or no consent, I'm not about it. Like, consent, consent, consent. This is like my thing. Like, just, especially for things being published today. Like, really, guys, like, unless it's in a subgenre where that's a thing or something, but like for general commercial romance being published today, like, just have clear consent. Like, oh my God. Anyway, yeah, another thing that irks me. Okay, I will stop. I have a lot of thoughts on this. So there you go. I will stop there. This is probably going to be a longer video than I had intended, but hopefully you found this interesting or helpful. Hopefully you took away some recommendations, and maybe this sparked some thought for you about what you like or don't like, or maybe encouraged you to give romance a try, because I do think that there's a lot of value in it. Talk to me in the comments down below. I look forward to conversations with some of you guys. I know there are really mixed feelings on this issue. It's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Off camera, I've had a lot of conversations about this with some girlfriends, some other people that you might want to check out that I think do a great job of talking about the romance genre and maybe have different taste than me in some ways, but have great recommendations and who I respect a lot are Mara from Books Like Whoa, Amanda from The Naughty Librarian, Lauren from The Novelush, and Brandy from Brandy Ginny's Bookshelf. So I will link their channels down below if you want to go check any of them out. They're also women who are romance readers in different ways. So question of the day, is romance something that you read or have read or been open to reading? Tell me kind of what have been your thoughts on this. I'm really curious to have this conversation. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.